Hi, I'm Cantor Mark Perman, speaking today purely as a clergy person and as myself, not as a member of any organization or any denomination, because there comes a time where you're very passionate about an issue, feel very strongly about it, and having thought about it and asked myself, if I talk about this issue, is it political? And I said to myself, no, it's a humanitarian issue. It's a concern for people and their lives and their well-being. And I'm very, very powerfully concerned about what's happening in Syria. I know there are different views on it and different perspectives. As somebody who had very distant relatives who were killed in the Holocaust, people I didn't know, but yet parents of parents of parents, the argument then was that in the face of violence, in the face of persecution and murder and oppression and genocide, the world stood by and did nothing. And that's exactly what I see happening in terms of Syria today. Not in terms of the politics, one can argue the politics, but when one particular leader decides to gas 1,200 people, when 100,000 people have died, when the world says to him, it's okay to do this conventionally, but if you do it with chemical weapons, we're going to stop you, there's some kind of hypocrisy that we have to really look at as a society and respond on some deep level. I was inspired by the teachings of my rabbi, who was Marshall T. Meyer, and you can Google him or look him up, who was a human rights activist in Argentina, who fought against the junta there, who stood up and many times put his own life at risk to protect those who were disappeared, those who were put in prisons, who was responsible for the rescue of Jacoby Timmerman, who was a human rights activist in Argentina. And that social activist kind of Judaism, that spirit of Jeremiah and the prophets, is what motivated and inspired me to do what I do. And therefore, in the context of the Interfaith Roundtable, I thought it was important to bring it out. So I'll just make a few more points, and then I have a prestigious guest, or as prestigious as me, Althea, who is a deeply spiritual person, who will speak perhaps to another point of view or a divergent point of view, which is great. I like that. But I ask you first to think about it. If these were your children in Syria, if these were your parents, if this was your family, if these were not people over there, if these were not people we perceived as terrorists sometimes, or Muslims or extremists, I heard a very intelligent person say to me, an educated person, well, whatever happens over there, let them kill each other. They hate Israel anyway. Let them kill each other. So that's the kind of mentality that I've heard, and it's a mentality that scares me, because it's a mentality that is not Jewish, as I see it, because Judaism believes in respect and love for all people and all faiths, and not just our own, as does Christianity and as does mainstream Islam. So two more points. The degree to which we've been desensitized to violence here in this country is shocking, and until something happens, like an extreme shooting, God forbid, people don't get up in arms until it happens here. 9/11, Boston. But when it happens over there, and it's on TV, and it's not one of us, we become desensitized, and I worry about that reality. So, Althea, I'll bring you into the picture, because she's going to tell me how wrong I am.
No, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong. I agree that we are becoming desensitized, and the problem becomes then, how do we unsensitize, resensitize ourselves so that we do feel that pain of the other people. But then you run into the problem, what exactly can you do? It's one thing to say, I love you, I love him, I love you.
Do you love him?
He's a wonderful person.
Oh, okay.
He's a very nice person.
Good. Good to know.
And so are you. and when you come down to it, it's reconnecting. It's making those connections and realizing that, I was raised Christian. But you're no different from me as far as spiritually. We're all spiritually connected. And when we lose our feeling of being connected, that's when we become desensitized.
Well, we certainly are global citizens, and that's one point I'd like to make.
Yeah.
People ask, what can we do? I'll give you my opinions about what can we do, because I've studied the issue, but I am by no means an expert. You know, a professor who's much more knowledgeable than me, Professor Anne-Marie Slaughter of Princeton, who is a scholar on the issue, said we need to be working with the moderates. Okay, we have a general there who gave up his role in the Syrian army to help be part of this so-called rebellion, which in many ways is a revolution, and those are the moderate forces. If we had been empowering and supporting those moderate forces, we would have been diminishing the jihadists and the extremists who came over by now. Okay? That's one point. The other point is, according to Jewish tradition and Christian tradition, well, again, I don't want to talk about Christian, Jewish tradition, we're a faith of peace and of love and of justice. However, if the issue becomes one of self-defense, and if the issue becomes one who is threatening to kill, and don't forget, when you use chemical weapons and gas, think about it.
Yeah,
it's in the atmosphere. It's in the environment. We don't know how they're using it. We don't know. Now we're asking to trust a country that's going to safeguard these chemical weapons. We're going to trust them and trust that these things are not going to be used and that they're going to be self-correcting. Think about how absurd that is.
Yeah.
Okay, and think about how they banned chemical weapons during chemical warfare after World War I because it was so devastating. Think about the spectacle of Jews being gassed and others during World War II, and think about the Kurds that were gassed by Saddam Hussein, which, by the way, the world did nothing about. So there's a consistent hypocrisy all the way through. So, you know, Israel has more of an approach of not perseverating and not debating all of these different things. When they have had to take out certain terrorist elements, they have said, look, these people are threatening us. They are a threat to us. We are Jews. We are moral people. However, we will go in and isolate those elements and eradicate them and take them out. In 1989, President Bush Sr. Arrested then dictator of Panama, Manuel Noriega, because he was selling drugs. He was a drug lord. He had him arrested and taken out, put into prison. Nobody shed a tear. You have Green Berets, Special Operations Forces, this whole idea of gaining into a war with Syria. What do you think? The military in Syria really wants to stand up and fight for this dictator? They're waiting for somebody in the world community to have the guts and the responsibility to take out somebody who's been a murderer, whose father was a murderer, who has slated himself president for life since 1971. The last question I would ask is that if we live in freedom and democracy and others aspire to it in other parts of the world, don't they have a right to it as well? Yes, there are some who are extremists and radicals. We don't want to support them. But if there's an element of people wanting to go, we don't want this anymore. We want freedom. Well, our Declaration of Independence spoke for freedom of all people. All people are made, well, actually it's men. It was said men. But it was inferred, you know, that we're all under God, you know, with liberty and justice for all. So that principle applies not just to us in this country, but to everybody. So those are some suggestions. But would you be opposed, and those who think similarly, opposed to any kind of violent solution because the Christian way is to turn the other cheek?
No. I think the problem I have with getting into Syria is that the premise was that there'd be no boots on the ground.
Right.
Which kind of points to using weapons of mass destruction, bombs and things like that, to eliminate the problem. So then you get this issue that you don't know exactly what you're doing, sending in a huge bomb, who you're killing. And so you could be killing as many good guys as bad guys.
Right.
So that's the issue I have, is I don't really want us to be involved in Syria because we don't have a game card. We don't know who's the moderates. We don't know who's the extremists on either side.
Right. Let me pick up on that issue of just collateral damage, because in World War II, we had to decimate and destroy a dictator in order to prevent him from what he was doing. And yes, there was severe collateral damage. In the bombing of Germany, there was severe collateral damage.
Right.
But again, just to stress, you're talking about one leader who's isolated from many, who's losing power, who was persecuted and not only killed 1,000 people the other day. Keep in mind he's killed many, many, many thousands conventionally. Keep in mind he's created a refugee problem of over 1 million that now is interspersed into other countries and other parts of the globe. The question then becomes, to what extent are we, the global community, and I'm not just saying the United States by itself, because I agree we shouldn't be the policemen of the world, but to what extent are we globally, even if you can't go through the UN, because you have countries like Russia and the Security Council that say we're going to obstruct this. I mean, the French had put forward a proposal to go in and do what we had to do to stop this. England backed off, the United States backed off. The world community working together to say in 2013, you cannot do this, this is unacceptable. Do we really, really think that if the world community rallied together, that one little minor peon dictator would be willing and able to stand up against that? But that willingness to commit together to a vision.
That's the problem. I think
Yeah.
the biggest problem is that because of that desensitization that you spoke of earlier, people are looking around and going, you know, our economy's failing. Throughout the global community, the economies are failing. And people are going, we have to protect ourselves. We have to keep ourselves safe.
Right.
And so you're losing that, well, you know, if I'm saving myself, I can't save you too.
But consider the slippery slope. If one nation gets away with using chemical weapons, guess what? There's other terrorists in other nations out there, Iran and so forth, saying, oh, look, they got away with it with an agreement. There was no punishment. There was no repercussions. We can now do the same thing.
Yep.
It's a slippery slope, you know, a test case.
Yep.
Finally, again, I'm going to talk about the Jewish faith from my perspective. I'm not speaking for any movement. I'm not speaking for anybody else, but for myself. Our tradition says, tzedek, 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 justice, 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 you shall pursue. That's the foundation. It also says to love thy neighbor as thyself, okay, which evolves into a Christian teaching.
Yep.
So if you love your neighbor as yourself, but your neighbor is your enemy and is sworn to kill you or to not uphold the values that you believe in, our tradition teaches you can do something about it. Not to turn the other cheek. Because otherwise,
Right.
because we are made what's called B'Tselem in the Elohim in the image of God. All of us, not just Jews, not just Christians, but even them over there, even people in distant lands, even people who don't dress or look like us, are all made according to the Jewish tradition. And I invite anybody to argue with me on that point. B'Tselem Elohim in the image of God. So I'd like to just do, if I can, a brief prayer. Actually, I'll do a little bit of Psalm 23. And those who would like to at home can follow. I'll just do a little bit of the Hebrew, which says, of course, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. You make me lie down in green pastures. You lead me beside still waters. You restore my soul. You guide me in paths of righteousness for your name's sake. Even when I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. With rod and staff you comfort me. And here's how it goes. Mizmor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, binot esheyar bitseni, al mei menuchot yenahaleini, nafshi yeshovev, nafshi yeshovev, yahancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. So getting away a moment from the politics of the whole thing, the desensitization. You know, are you a parent?
Yes, I am.
Okay. So children go and see movies with a ton of violence in it.
Mm-hmm.
People, I've heard, the last guy who shot up the Navy Yard was addicted to video games. He was doing violent video games for hours at a time. They used to bring him his lunch so he could just sit there and keep playing. Now that's an extreme. It's all extreme. But do you worry about that as a parent for your child? that all these violent images are around. They're in the music, they're in the movies, they're on TV. Every movie I go to, there's at least 2 or 3 coming attractions with very open guns and so forth, so on.
Yeah, violence, people,
Huh?
things blowing up. People,
Now, most people will say, I've watched violent movies my whole life. It doesn't do anything. I'm still normal. But I worry about the person on the edge.
Right.
I worry about the person who's already teetering, who's already angry, who's already frustrated, who's already getting a little bit off the planet.
Who's already not connected to people.
Who's disconnected, who's angry and disconnected, yeah. So, do you worry about your child growing up in this sort of desensitized
my
violent
child
world?
is now in college.
Okay, well, it's
so,
still your child. My mother said when I was 40, I'd still be her child.
Exactly. Well, I worry about the disconnections. That's what I worry about more than anything else. That the children they're not physically coming in contact with each other.
Because it's so through the net.
Yeah,
and
and they're not allowed to. You can't touch a child in school. They're not allowed to touch because of this whole, sexual issues and.
I mean, they can't. What do you mean they can't touch? They can't give each other a hug?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
It's come down to that point?
It's come down to that point. I mean, teachers can't give children hugs in schools anymore because of that whole issue of sexual misconduct. And there's nothing sexual about a hug.
No. Well,
there
could be, but a regular hug, no.
But a regular hug, or
so there's potential. People are worried about okay.
Yeah.
So do you see that as an extreme?
That's an
approach?
extreme. That's I mean, I think we've lost that whole coming together in a healthy way, because there's so much of the emphasis on the unhealthy that you start trying to be protective, and you get overprotective.
Of your child, of your daughter.
You do. You want to protect your children. It's a normal parent thing. You don't want your child hurt, so you don't want them to be. You don't want them hit. You don't want them sexually assaulted. You don't want anything bad happening to them. So you do try and protect them, but you have to have a balance where it's okay to hug a person. It's okay to reach out a hand and shake hands.
I don't know.
Okay. You don't know? It's okay.
No, but sticking to that, I understand. I think that's a topic for another, it's very powerful.
But when you don't have that connection, you lose it globally.
Yeah.
It's not just.
That's a good point. So even though, I can talk to people in Europe and I can talk to people over the world on Facebook and Twitter about some of these things, and you can interact with people in other countries,
right.
You're saying you're still losing that level of face-to-face kind of intimacy. Because, friends are... I remember a woman I was dating in Atlanta that her son, they broke up they texted. It was sort of texting going, I'm not sure this is working, and yeah, I know, I feel the same, and that was it. Now, how do you break up on texting? I mean, if you've had a relationship face-to-face and you've been connected, it sort of seems like the easy way out. And I know people who, via email, via words, and we've all done it, words have power, but then face-to-face, when you have to face, like the person who said, let them kill each other. And I'm not faulting that. That's an attitude we've all sort of had, that America, 9/11 doesn't happen. That kind of thing doesn't happen. Well, go to Israel. They've had many, many 9/11s for their entire existence.
Yep.
So when a terrorist incident happens, they're shocked, they're dismayed, they're crying, they're upset, but it's part of their fabric. Whereas here, there was almost an attitude of, how could this happen here?
Right.
And people had that during World War II, in a sense, this isolation.
Right.
We are isolated. But guess what? With global weapons, with nuclear, with technology, with 9/11, with terrorists, isolation is a myth,
right. Yeah.
So people might think they are.
Right, yeah.
So how do you teach your daughter to interact in a global world that on one hand could be very exciting for her and integrating, but on the other hand could be potentially dangerous?
I just kind of left it to chance, actually.
Right, you do, don't you?
There's a certain, you try and protect her, you tell her, you don't have to let anybody hurt you. Be it physically or emotionally, but at the same time, you need to be open to meeting people and
Yeah.
learning about other people
No,
and other
these-
cultures.
These kids do great things with it. I have a friend who's a professor in Montclair, and they've traveled to Tunisia, and they've traveled to parts of the world and taught kids there how to use sound equipment, how to use recording. They have integrated, that's part of their grant, is to integrate kids there with learning with kids here.
Yeah.
So once you start having that face-to-face,
Right.
like Palestinian Israeli groups meeting face-to-face, young children going to interact with people who are saying, oh, that's a human being just like me.
Yeah.
But but not to get into the politics of it, what I really wanted to look at was this desensitization and this kind of global responsibility. But the young people that I see don't pay much attention to the news. I mean,
Right.
if it doesn't affect them, if they're doing a government project or they're in school for that, maybe but they don't seem that connected or concerned. I don't see whereas a woman is saying to her daughter, gee, I hope you'll grow up one day and be in politics. I could see you in Congress. I could see you. That doesn't seem to be a noble profession the way it was.
Yeah.
So, if you said to your daughter or whatever, in that age group, who is the vice president? Like, would people know? Are they so living in their own insular world? And what do we do about
Actually, my daughter does know, which is kind of funny because I'm not political myself. But she does know, and she's more concerned with the actual global environmental issues,
Yeah.
which kind of also get into the whole political issues because it's all connected.
Yeah.
Everything is connected.
Right. So I'm going to do now with the folks out there, whoever's watching or listening, all three of them, no, I'm kidding, what I would call a meditation. Because again, it's very easy to lapse into the political and be critical of leadership. And this is more of a humanitarian statement. It's more asking, what is the United Nations doing? It's more asking us to be more responsible globally. It's more asking us to break this facade that something is just happening on television and it's real, and it's not real because it's television. Well, sometimes it is real. And I'll ask us at home to maybe close our eyes for a second and imagine that you are there, that you are living in a world of chaos, that you're living in a world of an oppressive dictator, that you're living in a world where your children, and this happens in the Middle East and many other parts of the world, and right here in this country, can't go out safely at night or during the day because there might be a random gunshot or there might be somebody who thinks they belong to the wrong party, arresting them and taking them away, and you might never see them again. We somehow have to use these devices to realize that this happens over there, and what if it were us? What if we weren't insulated? So those at home, close your eyes for a second. I don't know if you've ever tried this TV meditation. And use this time to reflect and to meditate. And then I'll sing what's called a nigun, a wordless melody, to help us have these deeper reflections. Lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai. Lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai, lai la lai 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 lai. So if you're concerned about these and other issues and you would like to come on the program, discuss them, interact, I'd love to have a way to interact live, but we don't have that facility right now, which is maybe one day. You can email me at mjperman9@gmail.com, mjperman and the number 9@gmail.com. We can brainstorm together on whether some kind of a performance in honor of those who are oppressed in the community could be something we could do, something involving young people. We have in our synagogue, maybe you have in your faith too, these mitzvah projects, where kids do a project to order to fully evaluate and understand what their role is as a bar and bat mitzvah, and that is to help make the world a better place. It's called Tikkun Olam. So, I don't know. I would hope that would help.
Sounds like a
little,
good idea.
little incremental steps.
Yeah.
But I really respect you coming on, because I know a lot of people don't agree with this point of view, and there is a legitimate, it's very easy for someone sitting back saying, well, let me be a Monday morning quarterback.
Right.
However, I do think there's a slippery slope, and we have to, on some level, at least together, be horrified by what's going on. And that, I think that's the part that bothers me, that there's a lack of that.
I don't know if we're actually not horrified. I think we try and protect ourselves from the horror.
Right.
And that's
so we shrink into our own world.
into our own world so that we don't have to experience that horror. Unfortunately, the horror is coming here. And we will be seeing this horror. It's just something, because you feel it growing. And you feel the people disconnecting. And so all these little horrors, they're coming. And they're here. They're here already. Sandy Hook.
Yeah.
Well,
that's another subject for another day. Is I tried to distinguish in a discussion on Facebook between those who mentally calculate to do evil and to do hurtful things out of a plan, and those who are mentally ill, who have access to weapons. That's a whole separate discussion for another day.
Yeah.
So thank you for being part of this, what I would call a stream of consciousness. It's certainly different than the usual roundtable format. I really want to thank Althea Greaney for coming on and just kind of going on this ride with me to wherever it might go. And can you give me the person's name of the control room?
Rachna and Phil.
Phil. And again, please feel free to write and respond about the program and how you'd like to see future programs. It's the Interfaith Roundtable. We're here on SCTV and other venues as well. And I'm Cantor Mark Perman of Farmington Valley Jewish Congregation, at this point speaking purely for myself, emphasizing that. We'd love to have you back on the show and participating. Thank you very much for listening. And thank you, SCTV, for giving folks like me this opportunity.
Funding for Simsbury Community Television is provided in part by contributions from viewers like you. Thank you.